This is the story that's got the country fired up and is on top of the list tonight. It's day 36. President Obama wants BP to, quote, plug the damn hole. Late this afternoon, the White House announced the president is heading back to the Gulf on Friday. Members of his administration are already admitting that the Gulf oil disaster will be the worst in American history. White House climate czar Carol Browner was asked about it this morning.
Any doubt in your mind this is going to be the worst oil spill in American history?
I don't think there's any doubt, unfortunately.
Okay, they got the message. Democrats are pushing the Obama administration to just go ahead and kick BP to the curb and take over this whole recovery operation. Florida Senator Bill Nelson put it this way: the president ought to take charge, the military ought to take charge, the military can organize it, and the head and be the head of the rescue operation. Otherwise, we have a situation that's going on out of control with BP doing the running of the show, and they're not getting that done. The White House knows that it's time for them to go on the offensive. A new CNN opinion research poll shows 51% of Americans disapprove of the president's handling of the crisis. But at the same time, 76% also disapprove of the way BP has handled the disaster. This is another case of how I think the American people are way ahead of Washington again. They want the president of the United States to clean up BP's mess. The president is getting the message. I think he knows that if this leak continues, it's going to be right up the East Coast, could completely destroy our environment and economy. I've said that from day one. This is going to be devastating if it hits the East Coast. It's already bad. But the president has another mess to clean up. At the Minerals Management Service, according to the New York Times, an inspector general's report shows federal regulators responsible for oversight allowed industry officials, that would be oil boys, to fill out their own inspection reports. And on top of that, the regulators were getting, let's see, free meals, fishing, hunting and fishing trips, and gifts from the oil industry. Seems to me that it's back in the Bush year culture, you know, those years where the MMS had a drug, sex, and rock and roll kind of culture that we had talked about and reported on in past years. Here's where we are right now. As I said on this program a week ago, the table just seems to be set that somebody's on the take. And lo and behold, here comes the Inspector General's report showing that that's exactly what's going down. I say follow the money. We need to have a full financial audit of everybody who works in the government, every inspector, every department head, to find out the influence of big oil and what they've had on our government. That's where we are right now. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. They ought to be able to do this. President Obama, you deserve those answers, and so do the American people. Tell me what you think at our telephone survey tonight, folks. The number to dial is 1-877-ED-MSNBC. My question tonight is, do you believe it is now the president's responsibility to clean up BP's mess? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. I'll bring you the results later on in the show. Joining me now is Mike Papantonio, an environmental lawyer whose firm is leading the class action lawsuits against BP. Lots of information has flown out of this whole scenario over the last 48 hours, comments that are more than interesting. But the blame, as far as the American people is concerned, when it comes to the cleanup of the mess right now, seems to be falling more on the White House. Mike, your thoughts on that?
Well, that's real unfortunate. You know, think about this. You've talked about this on your show before, but you have Bobby Jindal, Haley Barbour, Bob Riley, Rick Perry, all red state coast governors that all of a sudden are screaming, this is a government problem. You understand, Ed, these are the same people who for years said, we don't want government. We don't want regulation. All they do is get in our way. We want states' rights. Well, I got to tell you something. They're not talking about states' rights today because you got Bobby Jindal out there saying, where is Obama? Where is the government? Well, he wasn't saying that when he was talking about the idea that he didn't need government to give him a stimulus package. Our governor in Florida had enough sense to do that. Our governor in Florida, Charlie Crist, knew that government matters. So now all of a sudden they're trying to shift this from BP, who's responsible for all this, to the White House. Now, truthfully, there is some truth. There's some truth to some of the criticism about what the government's doing right now.
They're not moving fast enough, Mike. They're simply say, in my opinion, they're not moving fast enough, and the American people don't feel like they're moving fast enough. In your opinion, do we have the right people in place?
We don't. As a matter of fact, you said weeks ago that you came on this program, you said time and time again, this is a company that's winging it. They should have recognized it, Ed, the same time that you recognized it. And one thing they should have recognized is they don't have the right people in charge. You got Ken Salazar. There's a reason that environmentalists were outraged when Ken Salazar was put in charge of the Interior. Okay. The quick report card on Salazar is he led the charge to end offshore drilling moratoriums. He was the front man to give Exxon one of the biggest tax breaks they'd ever gotten during a year where they made $42 billion. He led the charge against the CAFE standards. He voted against the bill. I mean, this is a guy who's the wrong man in charge.
All right, we had a couple of interesting interviews on this program last night. This is Admiral Thad Allen, in charge of the Coast Guard, the Commandant. I asked him this question about how long it's going to go. Are you confident that this is going to get resolved in the near future?
Well, it's not going to be resolved permanently without risk until we have a relief well drilled and the drill is capped for good, and that is not likely to happen until August.
Until August? What in the heck does that mean to the American economy until August? Now, Billy Nungesser, this guy is a parish president down there. He's telling it like it is. Here's his response to that answer.
I don't think, in all due respect, they have a clue. I mean, you know, you asked him if they're doing everything possible, and he passed the buck to BP. They're the commanders. They're in charge. They can demand what BP does.
So where are we, Mike?
Ed, interesting. Salazar made the statement. He said, when we find out that BP isn't doing what they're supposed to do, then we're going to move them out and we're going to take over. Now, think about this. This is a guy who's making this statement when he knows that BP lied to us from day one. They never tested the blowout preventer. They never had a catastrophe plan. They lied to us about that. They knew that the hydraulic system on the blowout system had been failing for 2 weeks. They didn't do anything because it was going to cost them money. This is a company that has paid $153 million in penalties ranging from environmental felonies to criminal misdemeanors.
All right, let's follow some more about the money here. There was another comment yesterday at a press conference. Senator Mary Landrieu said that if you make $50,000, that, you know, BP's going to make you whole. If you make $1 million in the last year and you lost it, they're going to make you whole. Do you believe that? Do you believe that BP is making people whole down there and they're going to be writing checks for people's income loss?
Let me tell you what, the checks they're writing right now are required by OPA. Everybody doesn't understand that. They don't understand they're required to write these initial interim checks. It's not because this is a great company. I'll tell you what, when I make a claim for a man who's lost his business, 3 generations of being a shrimper, can't do it anymore, when I make a claim and that claim's over $1 million, you watch BP say, no, I don't think that's a legitimate claim. That's what we're going to be hearing right now. So we saw that they did exactly the same thing, Ed, in Texas. They did exactly the same. Exxon did the same thing up at the Exxon Valdez incident. All this is hoping that this story is going to move from the front page and people won't cover it anymore. And when it's quiet and nobody's paying attention, then that's when the ugliest side of BP is going to come out.
Well, one of their executives of BP, Kent Wells, he says that they've lost 25% of their market value, $50 billion. I believe you predicted on this program that in the long haul, BP, it might break them. What do you think?
It absolutely could. Here's the way they do it, Ed. It's not that they're out of money. They do what they call a projected loss, like the asbestos industry did. You had the asbestos industry. You had companies that were worth $4 to $5 billion, went in front of a federal court and said, look, Judge, we have too many claims. You have to give us some reorganization, bankruptcy protection. If you don't think BP is thinking about that right now, we're missing the boat. I can promise you they're thinking about it right now.
Okay, now as far as the cleanup, tomorrow is going to be a big day. They're going to try the top kill method. What happens if that doesn't work?
Well, if that doesn't work, then we have to believe what Matthew Simmons said when all this started. Matthew Simmons said, look, he said, this is only going to stop when the well runs dry. This is only going to stop when the upward pressure equals the lower pressure. That means there's not this gusher coming from the bottom. Now, this guy is not just a fanatic boob out there. This is a guy who worked for the Bush administration as a deputy secretary in energy. He's the guy that's written more about peak oil oil than anybody in America. This guy says you can't stop this because of all of the way that it's unfolding.
Mike Papantonio, keep up the fight, my man. Just keep on going after it. I appreciate your time tonight.